Well, DCKO number one looks to make an impact, but is it the kind I'll really feel, or just the sound of plastic action figures? Hi, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. That's your first and only warning. All right, we're taking a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on... Oh, crap, I forgot to make my notes here. The originally published is October 8th for DCKO, and the rest of these September 10th. So I guess probably October 7th is when 6th, something like that. Anyway, let's get into it. Green Lantern Corps, number 8. This is the Starbreaker Supremacy Part 4, and I think the most noteworthy stuff that I'm noticing, one, is the kind of dissolution of the avatars or the entities of the emotional spectrum. That kind of seems to be one of the main fallout moments. The emotional spectrum went away for a while, but now, thanks to Nathan Broom, aka Sorrow, it's been brought back. But the fallout leaves the entities, like the Parallax entity, for example, dead. And I'm okay with that. I think that the emotional spectrum, like each color having its own entity, it got a little unnecessarily busy as a concept. I think Parallax was useful back in the day to explain why Hal Jordan went nuts. Because, of course, I don't think there's really philosophical vocabulary at DC Editorial on how you can actually have a character like Hal Jordan really go nuts and then be redeemed in some fashion and have a salvageable life in which he could return to being some form of a hero. Sometimes I think back to that and I'm like, man, what if we would have allowed that to really be something that happened to Hal? He really did go nuts, and we had a slow burn character development starting back in the late 90s, early 2000s, where he is slowly coming back to being a hero today. What would that journey look like if that really had been on him and not him being controlled by the Parallax entity? I think there's some interesting what ifs that we'll probably never see explored. But anyway, for what they did with Parallax, I understand, but I think he's served its purpose as a concept. I think we can kill him, and we can kill the other entities as well. So I think we're cleaning house a little bit. And then the tease at the end of issue 8 is that Krona, in some fashion, is coming back. Krona, the rogue guardian that ultimately brought about kind of the doom of the universe, opened Pandora's box, if you will. So the Mad Guardian Krona coming back, I think... I'm interested to see where it's going to go. Even as we are saying goodbye to one part of Green Lantern history and getting rid of the emotional entities, we are seeing a revival of a classic Green Lantern lore concept / villain in Krona. So I'm very curious where things will go. I haven't been as interested in this arc as I kind of had hoped, so I'm ready for this arc to come to an end. I don't know if this is actually the end and the Krona stuff is going to be a new arc, or if he's going to be part of what's bringing this arc to a climax. That's unclear to me at this point, but bringing Krona into the story in some fashion with the Starbreaker concept not really exciting me is only a step in a better direction as far as I'm concerned. So that's Green Lantern Corps number 8. Then we've got Aquaman number 9. Now, last time in issue 8, we really saw this reveal of Aquaman's new powers, his capacity to control water and the level of power that he's operating at now. And I really thought we were having teased in issue 8 a more kind of settled story in issue 9 where his powers, their limits, is really kind of unpacked and we understand the new status quo, but not really. Instead, he has an encounter with the Justice League in which Superman is kind of like under evil control. Of course, so that gives us a reason for Superman and Aquaman to go toe-to-toe, and the other Justice Leaguers are surprised when Aquaman can actually stand toe-to-toe with Superman. He takes a punch from Superman. We do see a little bit of blood fly out of his mouth, but other than that, an evil Superman, presumably giving him pretty much all he had in a standard strong punch without holding back. And the most we saw was a little bit of blood flying out of Superman or out of Aquaman, and then he blasts him back with some kind of electrical energy. I don't know, whatever it is. And so in the aftermath, Batman's like, okay, well, we got to do tests. We got to figure this out. And what is his name? It's not Oliver. Crap. Arthur. I'm pretty sure he's going by Arthur these days. Anyway, he's like, no, I'm needed back on Earth with my people and stuff like that. And so I think that's a nice way to kind of dodge potential testing right now and having all the answers laid out. It does keep us intrigued in seeing him further test the limits, his new limits of his powers. So I'm still curious, but I'm glad that we seem to be done with the sword and sorcery adventures out in sea and time and space. I'm hoping that now we can move forward with something that's a little bit more introspective, a little bit more exploring the new status quo and how Arthur feels about these new powers. Get me into his head, get me into the character. That's what I would really like going forward. We'll see if that is delivered to us in Aquaman 10, but that's Aquaman 9 for now. A nice further peek and confirmation at his new powers and the fact that they don't seem to be going anywhere. Then we've got Batman and Robin number 25, and this introduces in a very subtle way a new villain called, I think, the Quiet Man, who by the end of the issue is shown to be a major threat in... It doesn't look like it's completely destroyed, but the Iceberg Lounge, owned by Penguin, is going up in flames at the end of this issue. But that's not the thing that's of greatest interest to me. Of most interest to me is with this, they advertise on the cover that a new arc is beginning here. And with this new arc, it looks like there's going to be a nice focus on the father-son dynamic between Batman and Damian, Bruce and Damian. And that's always very welcome to me ever since Peter Tomasi had his run on Batman and Robin that I really appreciated. I've always wanted a run on Batman and Robin to get us back to that kind of storytelling. And in issue 25, Bruce basically is reflecting on Damian and who he is and what they've come through. And he basically says, I want more for you than just being Robin. You're a great Robin, but you're also a Wayne, and I want you to have a life outside of being Robin. That's kind of like ultimately what he's fighting for, I think, is some sense of normalcy that he lost. He recognizes that he lost that. He can't give that back to himself, but he can give that potentially still to Damian. And I think we're probably being set up for tragedy in some way. I think Batman, and to some degree his supporting cast, they function best as tragic characters who have happiness taken away from them. So it's not that I'm really wanting in the long term for Damian and Bruce to have a happily ever after. I don't think that's going to work or be satisfying. But I think there's a lot of potential in seeing them try to get to that and get close to that, and giving us, most importantly, as readers, a hunger to see that, a desire to see a good relationship between a father and a son. Because then even if the characters don't get to have that, the hunger that it puts in the reader for that, I think, is a very good one and leads us to seek that out in our own lives. And so even if the characters are unhappy, our lives can be bettered, if that makes sense, by that. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what could possibly be mined from what they are setting up in Batman and Robin number 25. And then finally, DCKO number 1. This is an event that's been teased starting with DC's All In initiative, and this seems to be like, okay, where it's really kicking into gear. And I can't say that I'm super excited about it. First off, the name DCKO already says to me, okay, so this is like a Mortal Kombat story. Aren't we already kind of potentially dipping into that with the Injustice storyline, even though that doesn't play out with a bunch of, as far as I remember, one-on-one fights? It looks like this is kind of heading in that direction. I'm like, I don't know if I want to read DC's take on Street Fighter, and it's just characters. I think a lot of crossovers give us these veiled setups to have heroes fighting heroes, because we always are kind of curious who would win in a fight, right? But this is as thinly veiled, I think, as it could possibly be, and I like there to be a little bit more meat on the bones before you have stories where, Batman is fighting Flash or Green Lantern is fighting Aquaman or, whatever the crap. And they are trying here. They're basically setting up the idea that Darkseid is going to... He's gained massive amounts of power. There is no way that he can be stopped unless, like, one of the heroes proves to, I don't know, some entity or something, and it's been a few days since I read it. It didn't exactly stay with me. One of the heroes proves to some entity that they're worthy of being given the mantle of all this incredible power so that then they could defeat Darkseid, and then they would have the cosmic power to reset the universe the way they want and prevent all the destruction that's going to happen, reverse destruction that has happened. They kind of acknowledge that there has been a reboot, a reset of DC continuity, and they seem to be teasing that we're heading toward another. I think that's kind of like not going to prove to be where this is ultimately going. I don't think it's going to be a major reset of continuity, but I think there's going to be enough reset to revive dead heroes, because heroes are dying right and left and pretty cheaply in this issue. But just with where we start off, the story kind of is teased at the beginning with Superman prepping for presumably some kind of a bout, some kind of a fight, and it shows him putting on these these knuckles. The narration says, for this one, everyone even got to bring gear. Clark brought the knuckles. And I'm like, the knuckles? What are you talking about? I've never seen these before. I know I haven't read every single Superman story there is, but I have no idea what we're talking about to say Clark brought the knuckles, as if this is a known quantity. And then it goes on to explain he forged them in the fortress years ago after returning from the dead. Okay, yeah, I don't remember that story either. And there's no reference to, like, back in Action Comics, blah, blah, blah. So I'm thinking this is just made up right now, but I could be wrong. Knuckles with miniature suns raging inside. Angry suns taken from empty universes. This is a bunch of gobbledygook if I ever heard any. He thought about calling them Dawn's Day Knuckles, but Lois shut that down fast. So, okay, there is a little bit of levity, recognizing this is a little bit ridiculous, and this sounds like the makings of back in the day when they would have like alternate versions of the main action figures. So like you got Superman, but then you've got power punching Superman, or you've got flying action Superman or whatever. And this just looks like Power Knuckles Superman, the action figure. And this just seems like an action figure concept that is not thought out for story purposes. Why? Because I'm like, listen, if he did this years ago after returning from the dead, after fighting Doomsday, there are so many stories since then that I could look back on and say, why didn't he bust out the knuckles then? If he got these after returning from the dead years ago, there are so many stories since then where Superman should have busted out the knuckles, and for some crazy reason, he did not bust out these knuckles with miniature suns in them. What? So it seems like an action figure-y kind of childish concept that would appeal to maybe like a tweens reader, an early teens reader, maybe even more so an elementary age reader. But I'm just like, I am not feeling this at all. Now, maybe I'm coming down too hard on that, but there's other things that just feel a little bit off. Like the idea of Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent, and Diana getting together for a board game night. Just the proceedings there just feel a little bit silly. On top of that, they're playing a Justice League-themed board game that conspicuously has a lot of Bat-themed stuff going on in it. And then they find out that, like, basically this board game was made by a subsidiary of Wayne Incorporated. It's like, really? Like, so not only is Batman taking time to have a board game night with Clark and Diana, but it also at some point he took the time to get into the nitty-gritty of board game making to ensure that there were an extra dose of Batman-themed aspects to the game. It just seems a little bit silly. And the silliness is really cumulative. It's not any one of these things that's really getting on my nerves. It's like I'm noticing one thing after another that's just a little bit on the silly side and making this story seem a little bit weightless and like not worth dramatically investing in. When the big tournament, the first fight in the tournament begins, this is when we start seeing some really cheap character deaths that I feel like betray who these characters are, and it kind of disrespects who they are and the wisdom and experience they've gained in the past. Suddenly they're prone to dying in just really stupid ways, which one, just doesn't feel like them. It doesn't feel consistent with these characters. And two, seems like just a big tip off to me that like, you know what? You are not going to kill off all these major brands in DC publishing one after the other. So why should I take this seriously? Why should I feel any sense of drama at these characters dying when they're dying in ways that, and in such quantities that it's like, it's obvious you're going to bring them back by the end of this story. Now, maybe one could argue that like, well, that's kind of the point, Pater. You're supposed to get the tip off and treat this as kind of like a what if story, just a chance to kind of see your characters die in ridiculous ways. But I don't know, that it feels a little bit like Marvel humor, honestly, where it's short-sighted and it sacrifices, and by Marvel I mean the movies, MCU. I haven't caught up to the comics yet. But like just short-sighted for a cheap gag in the moment. It trades on just consistency with the character and an ability to invest in the story on an emotional level and feel some sense of tension. They are sucking all the tension out of this. Let me give you a couple examples. So first off, right when the first tournament starts, Billy Batson says to Superman, and why he right now is Billy Batson instead of not already Shazam / Captain Marvel, I have no idea. That's like the huge points against him right now. But he says, well, looks like we'll finally get to see who'd win, Superman or the Captain. And Superman's like, Billy, and he interrupts him saying, oh, you're going down, Big Blue, Shazam! And he gets interrupted by some giant, I don't know, foot or something from a giant monster that just slams on him, just kills him instantly. And I'm like, this is the first death. And I'm like, that is so, it certainly sets the tone. I'm like, that is so stupid. Why was Billy Batson not already transformed into the Captain? It doesn't make any sense. Then we got Adam Strange accidentally steps on something, and he just says, tell Alana I assume I love her or whatever, and then zap, he's just totally fried and dead. I will say that they appropriately use Ambush Bug, which is basically like the DC Universe's Deadpool before Deadpool ever existed, if memory serves correctly, who's like a fourth wall breaking comedic character, and hasn't been in a published comic for, I don't know, 10 years? Or more. I think he shows up every once in a while for some big crossover, and he just suddenly shows up out of nowhere, huffing and puffing and running, saying, "Look out! Obscure character in a massive line-wide event coming through. I'm at extremely high risk of death." Sorry, I read that terribly, but yeah. And then we don't see him really again, except for very briefly, and we assume that he died shortly thereafter. Of course, I don't mind Ambush Bug dying ridiculously, but then Batman, wearing appropriately mech armor, as you would expect him to prepare himself with in this kind of situation, says Superman, and Superman's like, Batman, what? And Batman says, focus, you need to stay sharp. And as he says sharp, he is stabbed through the heart from behind, something that pokes all the way through his crazy cool mech armor that's supposed to be outfitted, presumably, to go up against super powerful metahumans. Superman just watches helplessly as Batman totally did not see this coming and just cries out, Batman! And then the sharp thing sticking out the front has a little flag drop off of it saying bang. So yes, this was the Joker's doing. So admittedly, there's a big question as to, okay, how did these villains get here? They were rounded up. They were not intended to be a part of this whole thing, but someone brought them in here. So presumably, I guess I'm going to help them out a little bit and assume this is not just one of Joker's gadgets that was able to punch through Batman's metahuman fighting armor. But even so, Batman being surprised like that, it just feels like a cheap death. And we are to assume that Batman died here. So then there's a montage of all the other characters that basically got killed off, and at the end there's a 2-page spread that's like, now behold your 32 champions who will win and be crowned the King Omega. And on this list we've got the Joker, Star Sapphire, the Jay Garrick, which is an interesting choice, and I'm on board for that. Let's see here, Vixen, Green Arrow, but not Ollie. It's Green Arrow's kind of like illegitimate son. The Demon Etrigan, Superman, Cheetah, Hawkman, Lobo, Zatanna, Power Girl, Plastic Man, Batwoman, Starro the Conqueror. I don't know what in the world. Big Barda, Lex Luthor in his Lex Luthor armor, Harley Quinn, King Shark, Aquaman, Black Lightning, Supergirl, Firestorm, Damian Wayne. Is that, let's see, Blonde? I'm not seeing much else. I'm guessing that's Dinah Lance. I'm guessing that's Black Canary. Captain Atom, Swamp Thing, Cyborg, Red Hood, Guy Gardner Green Lantern, Metamorpho, and Wonder Woman. So, I don't know. I am noticing just a little bit of favoritism given to, I don't know if it's like actually characters that are loved by audience members, or if they're more, there seems to be just a little bit of influence of the DC movie universe here in Guy Gardner, specifically in Metamorpho, in who else? King Shark. I feel like that's a little bit, he's gotten a little bit of love since and Harley Quinn, since the Suicide Squad movies. Who else here? I'm befuddled by the Starro the Conqueror. Oh, I guess that could potentially be a what do you call it? A Suicide Squad reference as well. So I'm not super happy about that. And Mr. Terrific was featured pretty prominently in this issue, but I don't think we saw him die. So he might still be a player in the game, just not part of the tournament. But anyway, the further I get into this, the more it just seems gimmicky on multiple levels. And I'm hoping that in some way they can turn it around and make it a conflict that'll actually have some tension that I care about. But I gotta say, this is not a good start to DC KO with number 1. All right, well, that's about it for my blabbing. This week I chose the Black Ring just to represent a flat line of dead disinterest in most of what I'm seeing here. I actually liked Green Lantern Corps 8 and Aquaman 9 okay. I didn't dislike them. Same with Batman and Robin 25, especially with that one. You know, there's a nice father-son dynamic going on. But there's just nothing this week, certainly, that's getting me excited and really intrigued and on the edge of my seat to see what's going to happen in the next issue. So hopefully I'll get a more enjoyable batch for my tastes next week, but those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, love getting your thoughts in the comments below. You can also get this content as a monthly podcast if you'd like. All these segments just stitched together. You can listen to them all in one go each month. And there's a ton more content made for you at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.